So when am I to receive my assurances? Atharnil spoke as he popped another chilled fruit slice into his mouth, chewing lightly as he stared at Robot in an unimpressed manner. He hummed at the taste and nodded briefly to the red-haired maid behind him. Assurances? Guilliman pretended to not know what he was speaking of, himself working his way through a slice of salted meat. He let his gaze fall upwards and hummed for a moment. In truth, he had a suspicion as to what Atharnil was speaking of, but as the Dragon Lord started this conversation with that statement alone, it was only polite for him to complete the thought. Words were used for a reason, and Guilliman was getting nostalgic for human bluntness again. I was intending on sending a scouting group with you to retrieve your sister. Imagine my shock when my ally decides to jump away as soon as he exits the gate, leaving my soldiers in the awkward position of being too slow to catch up. Poor Tenglas didn't know what to do with your helmet. Atharnil let his head rest on his fist, swallowing another fruit slice. I knew you would want to retrieve her. I was intending on sending you aid, but you ran off before I could finish arranging that. Guilliman shook his head. I barely made it in time as it was. If I had delayed any longer, Morrigan might be dead. I couldn't risk that. Indeed. Which is why I'm not asking you to swear to have an accompaniment at all times. Atharnil finished the fruit slices, quickly leaning back for a moment for the red-haired maid to place a tray with a small cake and utensils upon the table. The cunning general changes his strategies to suit the battle, as will I. Oh? What are you intending? I'd promised then. Guilliman stopped eating for a moment to look at the Dragon Lord. The Dragon Lord sliced through his tiny, fruit-smelling, pink-frosted cake and brought up a tiny bite to his mouth, eating it while staring at Guilliman with a stony expression. He swallowed, rolled his tongue for a moment, and spoke. With a glance down at the cake, he got distracted. Oh, this is delicious. Atharnil muttered before dismissing the thought and refocusing on the amused Guilliman. I cannot ensure that you won't run off like that again, despite your absolute critical importance to this entire effort. Therefore, I shall make sure you are mighty enough to defend yourself. This is my insistence. Guilliman raised a brow. Didn't we determine my sword arm was superior to many of your stormcloaks at once? Atharnil waved his fork dismissively. No, your sword arm is mighty indeed, but you lack any education in wielding your mind. We will correct this. Guilliman scratched at his cheek. You speak of psychery. I was under the impression that you had to be born with the talent, and I was not. That was the domain of my brothers. Atharnil looked at him as if he had just said something incredibly foolish. Guilliman frowned as he tried to determine what it was. Atharnil put both of his utensils down so he could gesture with both hands at Guilliman. Guilliman, you have a potent weapon. It is gold and sharp. Can you remind me what it is? The sarcasm is unnecessary. It is the sword of my creator. Indeed. Now, that sword has an ability beyond the cutting and stabbing standard to swords. Can you remind me what that is? Guilliman frowned, getting a hint of where this conversation was going. It can produce flame, and the wounds it inflicts are more potent on things of chaos. Remarkable. Please tell me, Guilliman. As it is flame it produces, it requires a fuel. What fuel is used to produce the flame of your father's sword? I understand. Guilliman leaned back and looked elsewhere to spare himself the need to look at Atharnil's expression. He supposed it was rather obvious in retrospect, but it was never something he dwelt upon for any length of time. Truly, you are my greatest student. Atharnil spoke, changing his tone of voice in an attempt to sound older and withered. Guilliman decided to escalate the battle by picking up a cracker from the table and flicking it at him. Soaring as the shell of an artillery cannon, the cracker smashed into Asarnel's face, bouncing off and rolling on the table for a moment. Asarnel looked down at it for a moment, before turning back to look at Guilliman. A red sun rises upon this world. Blood longs to be shed here. Victory was his. Guilliman finished off his salted meat, the meal of a champion. He and Asarnel exchanged amused glances as they heard one of the maids around them, unable to contain the entirety of their laughter. Flickering ears, wobbling limbs, and face tinted red as she struggled to contain her laughter. It was something of a game they started playing. How fast can they make the maids lose composure through antics? This incident was a new record of theirs. It was particularly amusing because the jokes weren't even particularly funny this time. The scene was quietly completed by the severe expression the red-haired maid was giving, the one that made the noise, a desperate, wheezing exhale as quietly as possible. She attempted to stop her laughter, which of course only made it harder on the poor woman. The cycle was self-fulfilling now. Guilliman and Asarnel stayed completely silent and unreactive, staring at the maid in question as she slowly self-destructed into laughter and tears. A factory melting down from excessive heat buildup and the inability to vent it properly. It was actually somewhat concerning at this point. It had reached the point that stealthy concealment of the situation was impossible, and the poor pink-haired maid currently doing a grand impression of a convulsing hyena was practically dragged away from the scene by two other maids. There was silence on the balcony for a moment afterwards before Asarnel reached up to scratch at his chin in contemplation. Eluin, what was that one's name? Briaka, Dragon Lord. The maid with red hair answered. I like that one. Keep her on my rotation. He ordered. I, the cruel and capricious Dragon Lord of Charnak, shall delight myself with tormenting her. Yes, Dragon Lord. She nodded curtly. You shall be pleased to know that she baked the small cake you praised earlier. Asarnel gave a mighty and put-upon sigh, raising his arms in defeat. Well, that settles it. It seems I must wed her in the spring, Guilliman. You are obliged to attend the ceremony, and if you do not, I shall be so heartbroken that I may die. Guilliman snorted. I'll be sure to attend. Wraithbone sticks clashed in the center of a wide chamber, 4 against 1. The pace of the combat was rapid, as it was unforgiving. Strictly non-lethal, of course, but still entirely exhausting were the participants, normal men. The attackers had one objective: work as a unit in order to land 3 clear strikes on their enemy, before the enemy landed 3 clear strikes on all of them. This situation was clearly stacked in their favor, outnumbering their enemy by 4 to 1, and therefore requiring 4 times as many large mistakes in order to be defeated. Unfortunately for the 4 sisters, their opponent was their older brother, and he had dueled against his brothers entirely too many times to be defeated by younger, far less experienced equivalents to them. Among the primarchs, Robot considered himself rather poor as a duelist. All things considered, he was merely a man. Writ large, after all. Having none of the unique powers that his brothers were gifted with to leverage. He was strong, his endurance was superb, and his reflexes honed. Unfortunately for his sisters, he has been battling against a large variety of opponents for more than 500 years, and he has gotten quite skilled at it. Avoid the sweeping blow from Morrigan by stepping backwards. Block the stabbing thrust from Petra by smacking the blow upwards. Her arms intercept Cassandra, who isn't good enough to predict secondary effects with her foresight yet. Aurelia attempts a hammer blow from behind, step backwards and elbow her hands as the attack is at its highest point. A solid thud tells him his prediction was correct. Swing sword to tap her on the thigh, push her back by palm striking the sternum. 2 solid strikes, 3 in total. Oh, Aurelia is no longer in the match. She slides backwards for several feet, stumbling in place. Lorgar was never the best warrior. Use the space granted by her elimination to step back again. Morrigan's swing misses his head, smiled proudly to prevent the others from getting mad about the cheap shot. Tap her hip as she attempts to recover. One more strike. One more to go on her. Petra attempts a sweep of his feet, pull leg back and balance on the back foot. Use raised leg, lift her into the air, being careful to not kick. That would kill her. She is propelled a dozen feet up with a slightly panicked expression. He has a few seconds to deal with the other two. Block the flurry of blows from Cassandra. She's the most dangerous of his sisters by far at the moment. 1, 2, 3, 4. Force her to retreat with a thrust of his own. Her foresight will allow her to weave around it to make an attack, but it's not good enough for the secondary effects. Still, gently smack her shoulder with the blade, twisting it in his hand the moment she deflects it upwards. The moment she figures out that part, she'll be a nightmare to fight against. Eventually, she'll reach a point that he can't defeat with conventional and honorable tactics. Perhaps in a few decades at most. Conrad was always one of the most lethal of his brothers. Swipe at her to make her back away. Knowing that he would miss, however, he let the blow carry into a block against Morrigan again. He smiled, hearing Petra crash down on top of Cassandra a few feet away. They would take a few moments to untangle themselves, letting him focus on Morrigan for that time. Judging by the sudden widening of her eyes, she knew that too. Superior speed let him slip past her guard to tap her on the sternum with a thrust. She staggered back with the gentle blow. He turned his attention towards his last two sisters. Petra looked as sullen as ever, and Cassandra's face had long turned blank in absolute concentration. He smiled at the two of them and went on the attack, a sweeping cut that Cassandra avoided. But Petra was then forced to block. Cassandra lunged forwards to stab him in that same moment, but again didn't see him using Petra's block to bounce his stick off faster than normal, tapping her in her side and pushing hard enough to make her roll across the floor. Again, not a hit. That might kill her. He gently touched them, then pushed. One more hit for Cassandra. He fell upon Petra, who blocked a thrust with another upwards deflection, but was unprepared for a grapple. Grabbing her wrists and raising her off the ground, he tapped her flailing form twice, signaling her defeat. He made sure to smile at her as he let her down again. She got grumpy if she wasn't given positive reinforcement from time to time. He turned towards the last. 2 quick jabs against his torso, causing him to wheeze as he fell back into a hasty block. Cassandra's eyes shined as she fell upon him in a relentless assault. Block, block, block. Unfortunately, Conrad was much faster when Guilliman last fought him. This wasn't enough to overwhelm his defense. A twist into a tap against her chest caused her to slump, folding against his stick in defeat. He smiled as he lifted her up entirely, using the stick as a pole to hold her up like drying linens. Bleh, she muttered emotionlessly. Turning towards the other defeated girls, he began the second part of the lesson. Discussion. You all lasted around 30 seconds longer than normal this time. Morrigan's addition has dramatically increased your consistency in landing blows. What did you learn? They glared at him in varying degrees of dissatisfaction, even Cassandra's purple eyes glowing from behind a curtain of pitch-black hair. He almost reveled in it, exhaling in a slightly amused manner. He waved Cassandra slightly and tried again, adding a little more flattery. Come now. I'm certain something must have occurred to each of you. You're exceptionally quick learners. I'm bad at fighting, Petra grouched out, to which he shook his head. That's not what I hear from the Stormcloaks. Each of you is very talented. It's just that I'm very good at fighting. Still got hurt, Cassandra muttered. He turned towards her. She wasn't looking at him. Not good enough. Glancing at the other three, it seemed like they all agreed with that statement. He sighed. It seems they weren't over barbarous. He lowered himself into a seated position, then Cassandra into his lap, like food is lowered off into a stone oven. Much like a large feline, Cassandra melted into a draped position, a clingy habit that had yet to leave her from her initial rescue. Physical contact made them more willing to listen to him as he found out. He patted the floor, bringing the other three to sit down as well. None of those injuries were from fighting. I had done something very foolish and didn't bring appropriate equipment with me to protect against the environment. If I had done so, I would have been uninjured. And even now, I am fine, am I not? You mean Morrigan did something foolish? Petra corrected sullenly. Aurelia pursed her lips. Morrigan cast her gaze to the floor, and Cassandra didn't so much as twitch. He turned a scolding look to Petra, who looked defiant for a moment before her gaze dropped as well. Sighing, he replied. Morrigan felt she had to do so. Yes, it was not wise. But she's young, as all of you are. He let his eyes roam across all his sisters, wondering if this was how Connor felt at any point. All of you are going to make mistakes. Everyone is going to make mistakes. No one is exempt from this. What's important is having allies that can help you through those mistakes, who can warn you of the danger and assist you against it. He smiled at them. Failure is inevitable. What's critical are the lessons you take from failure and who you have to help you when you fail. That's what I'm here for, to help you get better, to fail here so that later failures are not so damaging. He raised a hand to stroke through Cassandra's hair, which she leaned into. That's why these spars are as a team. I want you all to learn to work together so you can rely on each other when I'm not around. I want the best for you all. Hey, you're not allowed to die, Aurelia declared, staring at him with golden pupils. The other three were also tense, staring at him. He quirked his lip. Who said anything about death? No, I mean my duties. I'll be away and working most of the time once we return to Charnak. Almost died on Barbarous. Morrigan spoke up, slightly challenging. You say you could have killed that thing? The thing that rotted my world? Guilliman was silent for a moment, rolling the thought over in his mind, before finally speaking. That was a creature known as a greater daemon. In my life, I have killed 4. But I do not think I could have battled it and ensured your safety at the same time. And there was nothing to be gained by battling it at that point either. Retreat was the best option. It killed half the people on my world. Morrigan stood up, waving her hands in frustration. What do you mean? Mortarion always had a very strong sense for vengeance, of righted wrongs and due punishments. He supposed it was true for Morrigan as well. Slowly, he began to explain his reasoning again. I could have stayed and fought, that is true. It's possible I could have killed that creature and extracted vengeance for those people. But what if I fail? But what of my duty to everyone else? Of my oaths to Karnak? Of my duty to my sisters who I love? Morrigan froze, considering it. Guilliman continued. In the end, I value saving who I can over avenging who I have already failed. I would like to kill that daemon one day, and if the opportunity comes, I will most likely take it. But I refuse to bring suffering to those who rely on me for something of that nature. There will be another chance to settle that grudge, but my sisters only have one me. He smiled gently, locking eyes with her. Saving you was more important than killing some villain. Killing him wouldn't get you off the planet, nor would it save all those who were already dead. Morrigan staggered back and turned to flee the room. Lesson isn't over, Morrigan. She froze again and turned to sit down again. He chuckled and tried to remember where he had left off. A sudden set of yells came from all the Eldar also present in the room, namely the guards along the perimeter. He frowned in small panic before running the calculations on the date again. The eldar rubbed against their eyes, as if they had just been blinded by a great flash of light and were trying to adjust to the new brightness. The room was still as well lit as it was before. However, the date told him what he needed to know. "What's going on?" Aurelia asked, eyes darting about. Guilliman sat relaxed and idly commentated, "If my judgment is correct, they are trying to adjust to the new light. The Astronomicon has just been lit. It's impossible to explain with you being untrained." A Sarnil made conversation as they awaited for the defenders of the 8-system empire they were approaching to make a decision. He raised a hand and gestured vaguely to the direction Guilliman assumed the Astronomicon's light was coming from in the warp. The warp is not a place of pure darkness. Lights ride throughout it as stars in the skies might. Psychic galaxies swirling of all manner of colors and shapes, gently swirling in a sort of eternal dusk. He threw his hands up in small amounts of frustration. "Your father has managed to undo that. There is now a sun in the warp. There is a golden, burning sun present in what was before a place of gentle, horrific twilight. Everything has been thrown into sharp and painful relief, illuminated by what I would normally assume was a Shurian making the kingly decision to demonstrate his masculine glory for the wheel. I did warn you about it." He assumed it was the eldar equivalent to the fruit of the domesticated malus tree. Petra's own gaze kept flickering in the same direction, presumably the space in the warp in which the Eye of Terra and the Astronomicon clashed. She was here on the chance that he might successfully bargain for a tutor for her. His other sisters showed little interest in potential engineering studies, and he knew it wasn't their intended functions regardless. She had yet to stop preening about it, no matter how much she tried to disguise it from him. There is a distinct difference in being informed and bearing witness. Sarnil jabbed a finger at Guilliman before snatching an eldar apple of his own and biting into it furiously. He chomped through it quickly, taking out his irritation on the poor fruit and finishing it off within the minute. Swallowing, he looked at his hand, now slightly stained in fruit juice. "Holding it out," he declared. "Maid, clean my hand." The pink-haired maid, trying her best to look at neither of them, quickly obliged with a slightly damp washcloth, a tint of red at the tips of her ears. Guilliman decided to ignore that situation, as Asternil's eyes glowed with mischief. Turning his gaze back towards the defending ships of the tech priests, he tried his best to ignore the slightly panicked yelp of the maid and the devious chuckles of a Sarnil. The Dragon Lord reminded him of Fulgrim at times like this. "Ow! Our father is lighting the Astronomicon." Petra suddenly said, worded like a declaration, but Guilliman could tell it was more of a question. Indeed, the complex is massive, on par with a small continent in overall scale, and exists to collect and project psychic power as warp light. The effect is more obvious when traveling through a warp drive. Worry not. Guilliman found himself struggling to answer that question for a moment. Visions of a holy corpse flashed through his mind, and ever-shifting words filtered through his ears like a half-remembered dream. A burning beacon of psychic torment, barely holding himself together, barely holding on behalf of all of humanity, incapable of correcting the rot in their dream on his own. My son. 13. 2. Hope. Greatest triumph. Greatest pride. Did a god love his sons? Perhaps. But he was not a god. Not yet, at least. Not ever if Guilliman could spare him that tormented fate. It didn't matter if a god loved his sons because Guilliman knew that a father did. That god corpse had burned all previous memory of his creator's face from his mind as a consequence of its existence. Guilliman could not recall that, but he could recall the man's deeds and what they told him of the man behind the divinity he once was. He could remember the writings about the man, good and ill. He could even remember Lorgar's book and all its arguments, even if he couldn't agree with the conclusion. Big. Guilliman eventually settled on. Ill? Big? Petra sounded distinctly unimpressed with his chosen adjective, big. Guilliman nodded with increasing confidence. The man is absolutely incapable of performing deeds in small and subtle ways. Everything he is and does can be described with the word bigs. Like the Astronomicon, she asked. Guilliman nodded in confirmation and continued. He stands about 4 meters in height. From what I remember last, he is an incredibly powerful psyker, and whenever he taps into his power, his eyes glow too bright to see his face behind the light. As he is focused on many things in the warp, his face is almost always hidden behind a miniature sun. In public, he words every sentence in the most imposing or imperious manner he can, and I'm confident he doesn't realize that he does this. He's a master in just about every field I can name. Guilliman waved a hand in front of him, reaching down to take another eldar apple in hand. Sciences, mathematics, engineering, psychery, medicine, history, sociology. Perhaps the only field I can match him in is statesmanship, and I don't suspect I'll ever reach him in any other discipline. He has a poor tendency to assume that you already know what he knows at times, and will forget to inform you of what seems obvious to him, even if that knowledge is esoteric to everyone else. Above all things else, he is utterly dedicated to humanity. He is willing to endure an eternity of torment if it means keeping humanity safe, an eternity of suffering for just one more moment. After a moment, he came back to himself and bit down on the apple. Swallowing it, he continued. He created us, the primarchs, to aid him in this task, to shepherd and steward humanity until the day comes in which they no longer need us. So what will you do after? Petra asked quietly. Guilliman considered it for a moment before smiling broadly and shaking the half-eaten fruit in his hand at her. Guilliman considered it for a moment. I would like to be a farmer, I think. Petra looked unimpressed. Farmer? Guilliman grinned. Indeed, I would have a field of healthy wheat, and with scythe in hand I would harvest the whole lot in an afternoon. I could bundle this and sell it to passing ships and keep the rest for myself. I would grind it into flour and bake bread in a stone oven. Surely not just wheat? Asarnil questioned very seriously, walking over once more, the pink-haired maid nowhere in sight. Guilliman pointedly ignored the faint smell of perfume on the Dragon Lord and the gloss of lipstick about his face. Surely more to life than just wheat, like tubers and fruits as well. Guilliman nodded seriously, an imperious frown on his face. More than just wheat. I have yet to mention the cabbages. Petra gave a small groan, much to the laughter of the two monarchs. The seer in a kneeling communication raised his head, bringing their attention. He turned back to look upon Asarnil and Guilliman and spoke. My lords, their rulers have agreed to a formal meeting. Their standards dictate we bring at least one large war machine with us as a showing of our military prowess. Malwarn should be repaired by now. Asarnil mused. Very well, steersman. Open communication with the seer and follow the path they dictate to us. Aye, Dragon Lord. They were the tech priesthood of Griffon IV, one of the strategically most important factors in the entire southern galaxy, either as a monumental boon or a staggering opponent. Ideally, Guilliman would manage to negotiate a full alliance. At minimum, he would aim for a non-aggression pact. Having them as his enemy would slow his operations in this theater almost too much to afford. Thankfully, Guilliman knew exactly how to negotiate with them in particular. The tech priests of Griffon were much more martially inclined than much of their brethren. Forge worlds. Their emphasis on individual skill and bringing glory to their respective bloodlines brought them much closer to larger-scale feudal knight houses than standard tech priests, to the point that they were somewhat famous for their titan duels as a means to settle disputes. The best way to the heart of a tech priest accepting a complete STC was through their titans. He also brought all the STC fragments he found on this voyage just for good measure. It never hurts to have more leverage when dealing with zealots. A Hab block was a semi-standard unit of measure when it came to larger residential constructions in the Imperium. Technically speaking, it came in 3 overall sizes. The true Hab block, a larger Hab block made of 9 true Hab blocks linked together in an even larger block, and an even larger Hab block made of 9 of those previous larger Hab blocks linked together in a truly enormous cube structure. A true Hab block was a single self-contained apartment-style complex. It continued 3 floors, each floor split into 9 blocky sections. The first floor contained the entrance in 1 block, the staircase leading up in another block, and a public restroom and showing area in another block. The remaining 6 blocks of space were apartments that could comfortably fit around 1 to 3 individuals. The next floor contained a public kitchen region in 1 block, the stairs in another block, and 7 blocks of living space. The third and final floor contained the stairway up to the roof and down in 1 block and 8 blocks of living space. All in all, it was around 33 standard feet, tall and wide. A perfect cube of standardized living space that he both loved and despised for its brutalistic efficiency. Of course, there was very little standardization when it came to how these structures were linked together, the largest and most inefficient of which were sometimes up to 1 kilometer on any side. They were eyesores at that scale, and inefficient eyesores at that. Guilliman loathed them. The procession of tech priests before him had been escorted by a selection of their Reaver-class titans, gigantic humanoid war machines, clad in heavy adamantium armor and void shields, acting as both avatars of the tech priest's machine god and as actually effective weapon platforms. A Reaver-class titan was mid-sized as far as titans went, typically deployed to support forces in fast assault roles, not as heavily armed and armored as the heavier warlord-class titans, or as quick and nimble as the smaller warhammer-class titans, but generally accepted to be a good balance between both. The average Reaver-class titan was about as tall as 2.5 Hab blocks stacked on top of each other, standing many meters taller than even the Wraith Knight behind their own procession, painted mostly gray, with yellow faceplates and pauldrons on their massive forms, accented in highlights of gold hammered into wing-like shapes. The tech priesthood brought a modest number of their own to this meeting. Only 12 such hunched-over giants of plasteel and adamantium, a definitive statement of power to the ones who came before them. These titans were surrounded by their ceremonial guardians, the Drukhari, machine-enhanced humans that served as the common soldiery of each forge world. Before these titans, the Fabricator General, leader of the overall forge world and its subordinate systems, stood. Just as all of the senior tech priests, the Fabricator General was greatly enhanced by machines, much of his original body replaced outright and clad in the long gray and yellow robes of the Griffon priesthood. From the waist up, the Fabricator General was humanoid in form and size, even if the majority of his body was hidden away behind robes, body armor, and machinery. In one hand, he held the symbol of his office, a massive halberd with a blade forged into the shape of a sharpened half-gear. This half-gear was attached to a distinctly eagle-like head, making it also appear to be a great mechanical wing, which was the overall symbol of the Griffon priesthood in specific. From the waist down, the Fabricator General was completely inhuman, abdomen descending into what would be the neck of a great mechanical beast, quadrupedal and claw-footed, with 2 massive secondary claw arms mounted on the shoulders of the lower body, near the waist of the original torso. A mechanical tendril served as a tail, and from its end swayed machine inputs that seemed to wander of their own accord. Behind him, A procession of 12 slightly more humanoid tech priests stood, each with gear-wing halberds of their own. Behind them, a procession of almost 150 more Skitarii stood in perfectly symmetrical rows. In comparison, Guilliman stood with a Sarnel mounted upon Deathfang, 1 Bone Singer, 10 Seers, 100 Dragon Knights, 10 Wraith Guards, and 1 Wraith Knight. A much more modest affair overall, as was proper for guests coming in good faith. The two parties stood on the wide, flat outskirts outside of anything the tech priest deemed important on this world. From what he could tell, it had long been stripped entirely bare of anything of value, replaced by massive plains of utterly flat stonework that likely comprised a majority of the Forge World's surface area. Forge Worlds rarely cared to preserve anything natural on their worlds, instead harvesting all biological material to sustain internal, machine-controlled farms of various types and reserving the rest of the planet for material strip mining. Mountains turned into flat plains, their stones harvested to fill in valleys and pave over entire biomes and build up massive fortress walls that stretched miles across. Oceans converted into gigantic bowls through sea walls and their ecosystems, carefully monitored and adjusted as they needed. Atmosphere carefully regulated by massive pumps that replaced the need for much of their land vegetation when it came to the conversion of unbreathable air into something human lungs could be sustained by. Right angles imposed upon every aspect of nature they could reach. This was a somewhat cleaner Forge world than most. The sky and oceans were still blue, and there were a few pockets of wildlife from what he could see from orbit, although those were almost certainly deliberate scientific preserves. He could tell the Exodites were quietly baffled by this level of heavy-handed regulation. They were used to the administration of a world spirit for their ecosystems. He was glad that they had brought the table he requested of them. This made his eventual presentation somewhat easier. You bring xenoconstruction and xenolife to our worlds. The Fabricator General spoke, staring at Guilliman, golden optics glowing from behind a yellow hood. The massive scale of his mechanical lower body only barely brought him up to eye level with the Primarch. His voice was heavily synthetic, carrying tones that only a machine could produce, and speaking in high Gothic. You speak to the Fabricator General of the Griffin Forge Empire, Carolus Caculatus. Present thyself by name and banner, Xeno-friend. Guilliman nodded and spoke broadly. His masked helmet was all that was left of his old armor. In the meanwhile, he wore fresh plates of heavy wraithbone over the standard bodysuit of the Eldar. This replacement armor was not as finely crafted, but it was heavier overall, which served as an adequate stopgap. It was blue, just as before, except a single red right gauntlet. He had long since learned that the best way to communicate to the tech priest as an outsider was with blunt honesty, acting open and backing your claims with robust supporting evidence, while deliberately not touching on topics of religious nature. Make a priest consider you in terms of calculation and not faith, and they were much easier to predict. I am Malam Kaido, son of the Emperor of Mankind. I have come to discuss terms, ideally for alliance, at minimum for a pact of non-aggression. I have ambitions of conquest for the southern segment of the galaxy, and the Griffin Forge Empire is one of the greatest tactical considerations in this region. All completely true, while being subtly flattering. Honesty in aims and nature. We do not recognize an emperor of mankind. Such a figure is not known to us, Corrales replied blankly, staring at him behind a shadowed hood. Guilliman nodded. He is the current ruler of Terra and of the Sol system save Mars, which remains in the hands of the priesthood. He has made an alliance with them, and the lighting of the Astronomicon is their first collaborative work. The Great Crusade has just begun, and with it will be the conquest of the galaxy. I am conquering this section of the galaxy, with intentions on joining with my father in 47 years. Define Astronomicon. The great light that appeared to the senses of all psychers, built by the priesthood, powered by my father's psychic might. A psychic lighthouse built on Terra. You claim he is allied with the priesthood of Mars. You bring Xenos with you. The eldar are divided into three broad categories: the city-dwelling, the nomadic, and the frontier-dwelling. The Exodites I am allied with are the frontier-dwelling, and they have access to a critical technology and a critical material that will make the expansion far more effective. The trans-dimensional gates you move through, and the psychoplastic you bear, Carolus declared. Guilliman assumed it was a guess, but one that was likely backed by many minutes of predictive analysis fed into cognition machines. The alien mechanism is a perversion of the truth path. The declaration was firm, solid, and spoken from the tongue of a pragmatic zealot. I know little of the laws of the machine. God, I shall not claim otherwise. I am a statesman, a general, and a man of logistical incline. I am not a priest, nor an engineer, nor a man of science. Guilliman spoke plainly. I request to make my proposal in full, at least, and allow ye learned men to cast judgment upon it once it is fully explained. There was a long silence between the parties, the hum of binaric in the air revealing a series of rapid communications between the fabricator general and his select priests behind him. Eventually, he inclined his head. Speak, O statesman. Guilliman nodded and placed a holographic imager upon the table between them. Turning his head back, he nodded at one of the seers to step forwards and operate the device as Guilliman willed it. Stepping to the side of the display which grew to fill the air next to him in a large map with diagrams and broad strategic concerns right adjacent to it, Guilliman began to explain his overall plan for the southern segmentum in terms the priesthood understood, numbers, and the raw calculus of conquest.